Subscribe to Film Companion for your film fix. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.
Hi Rahul, I had really hoped that we could do this FC retake sitting with each other, but it was not meant to be. We held off through the month of May hoping for a miracle.
Yeah, we did. We did. I was really hoping that I would, if nothing, be able to get out of my house and sort of get into a professional environment to shoot this like we normally do.
Yeah.
But this is the best we can do, and it's basically about what we say, so it's fine.
That's right. No one's coming to look at us anyway.
Yeah, no one's going to come to look at me after these 2-3 months. So I totally, I'm more than happy to keep speaking.
So Rahul, our choice today is Dibakar Banerjee's Oye Lucky, Lucky Oye. Which is a film that I had loved even back in 2008 when it first released. What were your first impressions of it?
Yeah, so for me, it was obviously a very different stage at my life because I had just come out of film school back then. I think it was 2007, 2008. I was still getting used to the concept of Hindi cinema on a whole. So I remember when I watched this film, I watched it with a lot of my fellow writer and director friends back then. Everyone was an aspiring writer or director.
Where did you see
and
it?
I watched it in PVR Juhu, I think, in Bombay itself. So I think when I watched it, and most of them were from the north, some were from Uttarakhand, and most of them were from Delhi, because that's the Bombay dream. So I remember an instant change in their body language as soon as we came out of the film, because honestly for me, I just enjoyed it as sort of like a desi version of Catch Me If You Can. That is back then. Like I was like, okay, this is cool, we can do the same thing too. But then over the next 1 or 2 years, I slowly noticed how these people, I used to hang out with my fellow sort of writers and all, and they were all pitching scripts and they were all trying to find their way in Bollywood. And they all became so confident of the fact that, their environment, their upbringing is suddenly represented, and it's also like a fertile environment. Because looking back now, I feel like Oye Lucky was literally the founding father of this quirky North Indian comedy in Hindi cinema. Because before that, it was always the screwball, loud Punjabi, stereotypical comedy where characters were given particular traits. But this was literally the start of such an avalanche of comedy after that, on not only comedy, just like even family dramas, all the films even we see today, the Middle Indian films, and so many of them, so many actors have come out of that. I remember for the next 5 or 6 years, even when I started my reviewing career in 2013 or 14, I had reached a stage where I was like, they need to stop the Delhi comedy. It's done. The Dibakar did it for his first 2 films, and now every step after that has been a step down. So, but yeah, for me, it was a very groundbreaking film in that sense. Now that I look back, what about you? You were still
It is an absolutely groundbreaking film, Rahul, and I think it's a film that didn't get its due because it was just unfortunate timing. It released 2 days after the 26/11 attacks. I remember watching the film, loving it, writing my review, and
yeah.
I don't think I went, because at that time I worked for NDTV, and I think I couldn't go to shoot the review, or I shot the review, and of course they never used it. There was other there were more pressing matters than what I thought of a film. But if it had not released at that point, I can never speak to whether it would have been a success or not. But the fact that what it did artistically, the narrative it kind of it unfolded was just absolutely so radical in terms. I think Dibakar is sort of the chronicler of our country. He has, from the first film, from Khosla Ka Ghosla, he is sort of pehle it was through comedy. Now his vision has gotten darker and darker, especially post LSD. Yeah. I feel like he gives us a portrait of the state of the nation, so in this film, I mean, the whole, I loved how it was completely non-judgmental about its own characters. There was no morality here. It was your hero was just a charming thief, and the way he kind of addresses the rampant consumerism. This urge to hoard. There's just TVs and there's shirts and there's these bizarre stuffed animals. There's even a dog. So for me, those things were just so wonderful, and I feel like it's a film that I hope more and more people go and rewatch to understand what he did way back then. But I love the film. I love the film, and now when I rewatched it again for our conversation, I admired it even more. The whole idea of 3 Paresh Rawals. So every father figure is a Paresh Rawal.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, now that you think of it, there were so many of these little touches that Dibakar sort of interspersed throughout the film. It's basically like the film is fooling us by, being this sort of very fluffy sort of Delhi idiosyncratic comedy for the first 10-15 minutes, and then it pulls us into a world where there is such a sense of cinema, especially the father thing that you mentioned. I also love the fact that it's actually a very sanitized version, in the sense sanitized version. It's sort of a family friendly version of a character like that, because in a way he wants to portray more of a lovable, harmless buffoon kind of character rather than a toxic character that we later started seeing in Delhi films. Like Kanu Bail, who was the director's assistant on this film, made Titli, and that's when we saw the evolution, or saw it explode onto the screen, saw Delhi in all its nakedness explode then. So I love the fact that that Dibakar still stuck to a very sanitized version of this particular character, and even because the lingo, I mean, as Delhi as it wasn't really authentic without the cuss words, without the particular flowery language that they had. And I totally get why they did that, because Indian mentality or Indian culture is such that when we see characters who cuss on screen, we immediately paint them as darker characters in our head. Didn't want that. So I think that sort of really sort of got us into that thing. It got families, it got a lot of people, it got a lot of characters in the film in Delhi who would otherwise keep away from such films actually watch this film. And even in the beginning, the way you said that he sees his, I mean, all the father figures have the same face. It's the same way in the beginning. I noticed in the childhood sequence where Manjot Singh is sort of,
he was so good.
He was so good.
Manjot
it was his
so
introduction to cinema too. And in that entire sequence, there's the part where he falls for this greeting card girl, this very shy greeting card girl. And when I was watching it again, I was like, it's amazing that her voice sounds exactly like a man is dubbing and stereotyping a woman, like a very shy, coy voice. It almost doesn't seem like her voice. That's almost the way his character perceives a shy girl to be. The same way he perceives father figures to look like his father, even though they actually don't look like Paresh Rawal at all. And I love those those little touches, because it adds so much to the I mean, cinema is all about hindsight too in the end, and it adds so much to your understanding of the. He pursues only these shy, coy kind of girls because he looks at them as sort of a challenge, as a theft, because he's opposite to them. And it all adds to his thief character in the end.
Yeah. And the other character who I just loved was Bengali, Manu Rishi, who also, of course, wrote the dialogue. He's just a great friend, and the lines are so good. That whole idea of police ne maar liya, aapne kha liya, aise to relationship shuru hoti hai, something like that. It's just sort of these casual throwaway comic lines which were so wonderful, and kind of it all hinted at darker things, but he never went there.
He never went there. And that's actually the beauty of this film, because so many filmmakers consider it to be a sort of a compromising of their sensibilities, but here it seemed so organic. And Bengali, as you said, obviously, I mean, I always felt like Bengali was in a film of his own in that film, even because everything he was doing was also from a very street smart hustler kind of gaze. He was also trying to be the middleman all the time, and in the end, he screws Lucky over. And in an opposite film, he would have been a very unlikable protagonist because he is not as charming as, say, Abhay Deol. He's
Correct.
not he's not as aggressive as the Paresh Rawal characters. But yeah, I love the fact that they even used. If you notice, the time lapses were shot in photographs, like almost like Kodak albums and all. And that totally went in with Lucky's personality as a thief, because thieves do have photographic memories. And that was the first time I saw a Hindi film be so creative with the transition of time, because we normally just do like a dissolve or a fade in and a fade out,
Correct.
or we use a little ticker at the bottom and all. But this, I'd never seen something the way the use of music, the way Sneha Kanwalkar, that was my first introduction to her music too, before Gangs of Wasseypur.
Starting with the titles,
with the titles.
Titles come at you with all the sort of 70 Hindi movie, bluster. It's just fantastic. But what was interesting for me, Rahul, was also that he didn't take, he thought that his audience was intelligent enough to accept that there would be 3 Paresh Rawals, and nobody would comment on it. There's no acknowledgement that, oh my God, the father and Gogi and the other guy, they're all the same. It was just it. I love that he trusted his audience enough to say that I'm trying to say something by casting the same actor in all 3 roles, and he just goes with it. I thought that was wonderful. I also loved the interactions between Richa Chadda's mom, Lucky. She's, that whole idea of, oh, aa gayi ghar, ulti kar rahi hai kya? It was like drunkenness was so casual, and I love just the lack of judgment towards these women. It was fine.
That's a great point, because Richa Chadda's character was a breakout it was a breakout role for me. Like I remember even including her in the top 50 memorable side character series, because obviously for a lot of us it was the first time we saw her, and she's had a long career after that. But that particular performance sort of really established her. The way she did the whole West Delhi drawl without coming across as a character who's been put in only to make people laugh, with the whole like naughty monkey, and even the accent she uses is amazing, because it's stuck with her career. If you think about it, the smarter directors have used her in those kind of roles like Fukre, and the few films that she really stands out in. It all has shades of the way Dibakar used her. I actually noticed that in Dibakar's next film, which is Love, Sex or Dhoka, I think the editor Namrata Rao was, she actually did a very similar role in Love, Sex or Dhoka as the girl in the supermarket, where I think either Rajkumar Rao works, or in one of the narrative, she is also speaking exactly like the Richa Chadda character. So I felt like when I was watching Love, Sex or Dhoka, I was like, I've heard her before. She's a different actress, but it's the same person. I can tell.
Yeah, and I love this sort of smaller detailing, like the dog, who's like the high society dog, so has to be called by the cops in a certain way. Sort of the film is a commentary on all those class divisions in Delhi, which part of the city you come from, and just done without sort of hitting you on the head with it.
Yeah, and that's how beautifully he's used the entire device of making him a thief. So it's basically like a device of making someone a wedding planner. Like we saw later on, film started doing that.
Yeah.
By having a wedding planner, or on the opposite end of the law, a thief, you get into so many different atmospheres and households that you see an entire cross section of Delhi. And that's and obviously a thief thing is more entertaining, because it's not exactly a romantic story we are seeing here. We are talking about a guy from a dysfunctional family who's sort of trying to fill in a void, and he's addicted to this whole feeling of outwitting other people that are normally higher up than him in society. Because if you look at it, he's doing a job like anybody else, because all of us do our professions with the purpose of trying to sort of be clever according to our intellectual capacity. We try to outdo the other person in our job all the time subconsciously. Here he's doing it on a more fundamental primal level as a thief. And I thought he did it beautifully, because the kind of people he targets, the rich people, they aren't exactly portrayed as idiots in the film either. They are the kind of Delhiites that we see who are so proud of status and of izzat, and all these, and we know these people, we met these
Exactly.
people, and at the same time, he's stealing from these people. Why? So that he can also sort of be that same person. Because if you noticed in the latter of the film, when he goes to Sonal's house, he loves showing off. He loves that the mother is spoiling him because he's a little richer and he can offer, like, मैं आज restaurant में 15 lakh डाला, something. So he's basically acting exactly like the people he steals from. And the best part is Abhay Deol plays it in such a way that you can sense that the character is not self-aware enough to know it.
Yeah. For me, like this performance, a few of the others he did, Dev D, just such a wonderful sort of mix of kind of leading man charm and yet something darker. You always sensed in him that there was a place where he could go very easily, which was not hunky-dory and not wholesome and all the things that traditional Hindi cinema is. And Dibakar used him so well in this film, in Shanghai. He really sort of pushed him as an actor. And here, because, there are moments where you can see the sort of dysfunctionality within Lucky, when he meets his brother at the hill station.
Exactly.
And just his humiliation, his longing for something bigger than what he has. And of course, his thieving is also a sort of pathology. I mean, he's like you said, trying to fill that void, trying to move up the food chain, trying to kind of almost fill the kind of lack of love with just things that I'll just have itne VCR or itni shirts or ye statue bhi le lunga. And there's that great moment when he's unpacking the loot and these two aunties are watching him and he's taking out these bizarre things. Like, you wonder why.
A bundle of money.
Yeah, and just the money comes out. And, you wonder, why would a thief take any of this? Because it's not really about the stealing. It's about so much, it's about so much else. I wonder, Rahul, what do you think, that this was a movie that perhaps was a little ahead of its time?
Yes and no, because in the sense, on a sort of a commercial level, obviously it may have been slightly ahead, because obviously not a lot of people noticed it because it was bad timing, and Bollywood was, or like Hindi cinema was just starting to enter a phase where Anurag Kashyap was going to be at his peak, Imtiaz Ali was going to be at his peak, Dibakar was going to be at his peak. There was this whole parallel but mainstream movement going on at the same time. So in that context, all their films in these 3 or 4 years were ahead of its time, because they didn't get a lot of takers then. Yeah. But if these films didn't come out then, they wouldn't have been cult films later on, because the way we now sort of look at them, the reverence we talk about it with, because even now I can't really find something to, there's no fault I can find in these films, even though we are watching it 12 years later. And if it hadn't come out then we wouldn't be looking at these films as, as these films that have really become more and more relevant with time, and they hold despite that. It's just that time has sort of added an entire legacy for a film like Oye Lucky and Khosla Ka Ghosla, and even his films later on. So I think that so I think yes and no. What do you think?
Absolutely. I just, because I look at it even now, Rahul, and I don't see other cinema like it. Yeah. I don't see a director trying to do the things that, of course, there's been plenty of Delhi comedies and all this idea of West Delhi and that class system and all of that. But just the kind of creative risks he took. I still don't know many directors who are doing stuff like that. And I just think that he's genuinely one of the most lauded directors. I feel like we don't fully kind of appreciate all the things that Dibakar has consistently done since Khosla Ka Ghosla. And film after film sort of pushed for him to go from this to an LSD, where again he's pushing the envelope in every way possible, including the form, trying to kind of explore those things. And I think maybe the darkness in the vision is perhaps what is not so palatable to people anymore. I don't know, because of course Shanghai didn't work. Byomkesh, which was his attempt at sort of going mainstream, didn't connect either. And I felt like that film kind of didn't feel fully Dibakar and didn't feel fully something else either, and of course I'm dying to see what he's done with Bunty or Pinky, but I just feel like what he did was just so just wanting to push the boundaries every single time, and which is so wonderful. And I hope that our conversation encourages people to go back and discover this film. It's really one of the, like you said, it's one of the groundbreakers.
Yeah, it's actually it is even now like a cinephile and a film student's dream, because he is probably one of the most versatile filmmakers of our time.
Yeah.
The way he went from one space to another, and at the same time, despite like this film was that very sweet spot that I personally feel that even Khosla Ka Ghosla could not attain, even though it was a very, very masterfully written film. I still feel like Oye Lucky sort of achieved that very sweet spot where, because a lot of filmmakers after that who did make a lot of very similar films to Khosla, who started taking risks, they used to get carried away with the idiosyncrasies, with the quirks, with the whole milieu and with the texture of this Delhi or the North Indian environment, and they used to forget somehow to sort of lend any sort of depth to the characters. And it used to always become about, look at how we are observing our environment, look at how authentic we are. But
Right.
Here what Dibakar did was actually make a character who, if you take out of that environment, if you take out of Delhi, that's how the film ends. He's just walking away. You never know he's going to go to Bombay after this, for all you know. And if you take him out of that environment, he's still as layered as, say, earlier. Because, and in so many ways, it reminded me of Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in Catch Me If You Can, because that's also such a tricky template to pull off.
Yeah.
It's a crowd-pleasing template. You're trying to be entertaining. You're trying to sort of have a commentary on society, on the people that are stolen from. But Dibakar somehow managed to find a balance that I've not seen in many of his films also after that.
Maybe it's time for part 2. Maybe he's walked to Bombay.
Yeah, I actually love that they ended it like that, because the cops being made a fool of again, and it just feels like a never-ending story.
It is. You can just see Lucky having adventures for the rest of his life and sort of suavely walking away. And yet, what is wonderful is that suaveness never kind of becomes that slightly unrealistic James Bond type of territory.
Right.
It never veers into that.
And at the same time, the heaviness, the resolution, that emotional realization in the end that his family has rejected him, his marriage will never sort of work because of the personality he is. That heaviness also is not overdone, because a lot of filmmakers just want to give a film a resolution, an ending, and sort of come, and it becomes a little unrealistic in the end because of that, because there always has to be sort of a crowd-pleasing, happy ending. I saw a lot of films after that who did that. The whole film was great, but then suddenly the existence of an ending ruins it. Like, I think Bareli Ka Barfi, I had the same reaction in the end. I was like, it was going perfectly. And why did you have to do that? So I love the fact that there's no such pretension here. He just walks away without, really going existential, without turning into this alcoholic or this dark character. And he probably walks into another film.
Well, let's hope. And who knows, maybe somebody, hopefully somebody will fund Dibakar to make part 2, and Lucky will have many more adventures. So Rahul, I feel like you and I can agree that it's time to revert to yet another Ranbir film for our next FC Retake.
Yeah, it's been a while. I was waiting for this. Felt like you were. It felt like I was an addict in rehab right now, but you've finally given me a sniff of like the cinema I really wanted to get back into. So yeah, I'm
So,
very glad that you've chosen this.
so let's do Rockstar next month.
Yeah, more than happy. It'll probably be a 3-hour video because I have a lot to say.
You
about
know,
Rock.
I am curious to see my own reactions to that film, because I will tell you right away that it was not a film I loved back then. I loved Ranbir Kapoor. I remember tweeting about how he was the finest in Bollywood. After watching this film, I said, I'll talk about the film later, but for me, this is the finest actor working today. And then I remember sort of mulling over the movie and not really enjoying it, and also having a whole kind of question about, is it working more for male critics than it is for female critics? So let's get into all of that in our next episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Rahul, you take care and stay safe.
You too.